and gentlemen, I'd like to now welcome on stage our guest of honour at the Newark show, an icon from the 70s and 80s, a hero of mine, a 12 times British champion, Mr. Roger Marshall. Make yourself comfy, mate. Roger, Reggie. Why do they call you Reggie? Why do I call you Reggie?
Just a nickname that come in the early days of me and Roger Burnett and people like that, and you know, it just stuck for some reason. Our nicknames do. So people who's known me a long time call me Reg.
Perfect. Right, well obviously quite a local man, started life or living in Waltham, I believe, you know, from your younger days, and started life as an electrician. That was your trade. I think a little bit like me, quite a late starter to racing.
Yeah, I think it was like that then, Steve. I think my father was a Sparky, and I wanted to work for a guy called Freddie Frith, who had a motorbike shop in Grimsby, and I did a year going for interviews, but my dad had my name down at a local electric company, and the job fell through with Freddie. I didn't get it, and I started as an apprentice electrician, but you know, I was brought up in a council house in Waltham, where you mentioned, on the outskirts of Grimsby, and things were a bit different then. You started on a £5 a week at Sparkying, and worked on the Dodgems and that when the fair come to make a bit of money, and you know, but you know, the thing was to save up for your first road bike. It's all changed a little bit. You had to go your own way. My father could only just afford to keep a family. You know, there was nothing else. So the first go was on a sidecar with a guy in Cleethorpes called Jim Johnson, and we went 50-50 just to start racing, basically, and that's how it all began.
So obviously, you know, you was into bike racing from a very young age, I guess.
Yeah, my father took me to Cadwell Park when I was 7, and I clung onto the wire fence and I watched everybody go over the mountain like you do, and it was so exciting, and to see Aylward and Ivy and all these greats, I was honoured to see all that era, and then I went back to school on the Monday, and that's all I ever dreamt about, and just rode me push bike and imagined I was going around Cadwell all the time.
So obviously, you know, as you said, 12 British Championships, a fantastic career, spanning over quite some time. Why sidecars? Why starting sidecars? Just for the cost?
I think the era then, there was a lot of people doing sidecars in Lincolnshire, and I think anybody in this crowd here who ever saw the Chris Vincent, the Brian Russ, all the local boys, you know, it was an exciting time when when sidecars were sorry, there's a picture here, mate, of me sidecar racing days, and it's just making me laugh because, you know,
what is that outfit?
It's a 750 Triumph engine in it, and basically it was held together with tape, you know. So, but you know, the sidecar thing was sidecars moved about. If your passenger slipped, the wheel was in the air and you were off on the grass. But we did spend most of our time on the grass, believe it or not.
So how long was your sidecar career?
It was a year, and but my sidecar passenger aged 20, I think. You know, unfortunately he was a teetotal, and anybody who knows me knows I like a pint, so you know, there was lots of days when the job was a bit of a blare, and I remember one particular day, it wasn't the best looking sidecar or the fastest thing, but we went out for practice and we're going down the back straight at Cadwell, and I started passing people, and I thought, flipping heck, the old girl's flying today. And the next thing is, I'd forgotten about park corner, so we flew off and it did everything but roll, and I come to a standstill, and I don't know where my passenger was, but I was slumped over the bars, and the next thing is there was a big thump on my back. It was his helmet, and he basically, he didn't swear, he just said, find yourself another flipping passenger, and climbed over the wire fence at park corner and walked off. So early days.
You're obviously known as a very fast and a hard rider, and of course liking a pint or two. Is that where you learn your trade as a sidecar? I've just seen this picture as a sidecar driver. Flipping neck, it looks like you're living in the jungle.
Yeah, I was a pretty wild character in them days, you know. It didn't bother me whether I slept in the wood at Cadwell or under the car. You know, the job didn't bother me. He'd have a few pints, and you know, we were rough, hard men then, and partied hard and lived hard. But you know, we did it for fun, and I can honestly say, right through my career, I did it for fun, and I was lucky enough to climb the ladder like I did.
A few beers at a club meeting, sleep in the tent, and then get rid of a bit of steam the next day.
Yeah, the thing is, Steve, it's like, you know, I mean, you were one of the fittest men on the track, and in my day, that's what helped me do what I did, because training to me, when I did get a factory ride eventually, I could train with Grimsby Town from 9 o'clock till midday, then meet Roger Burnett at the squash club, do a 3-mile run with him, play him at squash for an hour, do the gym, and then I'd go back home, and I had 2 dogs then, and I'd do an 8-mile run in a day, you know, but nobody saw that in me, you know, and they all thought, oh, he's drinking, he'll be no good tomorrow, but that was my secret weapon.
So, I mean, that was your 3-wheel career, so when did you actually swap over onto 2 wheels?
Like you said, 1 year on the sidecar, and then obviously I come out of the time as an electrician and got a bit more money doing that, and I worked away all the time, Scotland, anywhere I could to earn money, and saved, and I bought a 350 Yamaha from a gentleman called Colin Ray in Grimsby, who had a fairly successful career on single cylinders, Manx Nortons, etc. And sorry, some of these pictures are making me laugh. But I bought a 350 air-cooled TR2B Yamaha, and Colin Ray basically told me that was the gearing. I entered a club meeting at Cadwell, and thought I was going to really be the main man, and I didn't pull top gear on this bike, and I finished 16th in a 350 race, my first race, and I thought, Jesus Christ, you know, I didn't think I was this bad. And next week was going to Snetterton, so I said to the lads who were in the van with me, I'm leaving this gearing on until I can ride this bike. Anyway, at Snetterton I diced for the lead the whole race and finished second to a bloke called Roger Keane and a local lad called Dave Oban was third, who were 2 good goers then. And then I went to Cadwell on the Sunday, and I said to him, I'm changing the gearing, you know, because that's how not thick we were then, but you know, green if you like. And anyway, I changed the gearing, and I won the 350 race and beat the late Phil Aslam on his Matisse in the 1000 race, and did a 1:10.2 round Cadwell, which was bloody quick then, and that's when my career started to take off at club racing.
So what year did you actually start? What was your first year? Can you remember?
1970.
70 was it? Okay, alright. Well, I was never into road racing as a kid. I was massive into grass track and speedway, but I was taken along to Cadwell Park for I'm guessing it would be something like 1978 to quite a big national meeting, and there was this guy there, I'm not sure what was on there, obviously yourself, on a 1950 Yamaha. But all I can remember was watching somebody riding around with a star on the helmet. What's that star all about? Why was that always on the stand over the front of your helmet?
It'd be about the third race. Obviously, I had plain black leathers, a plain helmet, the white helmet at the time, but there was a guy called Ginger McHale and his wife who used to go and marshal at Cadwell, and they were from Grimsby, and they said, do you mind if we make you something so we can pick you out? I said, not at all. So they came to Cadwell the next meeting at the club race. They had these little 8-pointed stars cut out and a silver one to sew on the back of my leathers, and so that's how it started, that 8-pointed star, which was really unusual. And you know, I've seen all the colourful helmets and everything, but you know, I just stuck with it through my career, and a bit like Aylward and Phil Reed with that distinctive helmets. You know, I mean, the colour helmets obviously are lovely nowadays, but you know, the mechanics and everybody always said that, say you were coming around Coram Curve at Snetterton, and they were in the pits, you could always see where you were, or the star, or if you were still upright.
So obviously 1970 you started racing. How long before you won your first British Championship?
1975 on the 750 Maidstone Saunders Yamaha.
And I believe, or I was told earlier, as your career kind of set off, you had an awful lot of help from Steve Machin, brother of Jack Machin, from Lincoln.
Yes. Obviously Steve Machin was a massive part of my career, because the first year on the 350 Yamaha, which we're talking about, I remember at the 2 meetings to go, I did a main bearing on the 350, and we just took the head and barrels off in the pits, as you do, and you know, the job wasn't looking good, and my mate was nudging me, and we looked up and I saw this green transit van, and it was Steve Machin with his Jack Russell on his knee, and I said, flipping heck, you know, because sort of hero, you know, British champion. And anyway, he got out of the van and just said, what's up, boy? And I said, oh, I think it's done a main bearing, Steve, so that'll be the end of the year. And he just looked in this sad box of spanners that I had, and mainly grips like, and he just helped us take the engine out, and he said, I live at Ludford, come and pick the engine up on Thursday. I said, Steve, I ain't got any money, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we went up there, and he charged us 15 quid, which was probably about 120 quid's worth of work, and a new clutch, and then he got the garage at Barkwith, and he took an interest in me and coached me, and you know, obviously we all know that 74 was he lost his life at Cadwell, and that really affected my career. I didn't ride very well for over a year, and you know, I'd never lost anybody real close, and we lost Phil Haslam, went to his funeral 3 weeks before that, me and Steve together, then that happened, and you know, it was a real dark period of my life, but a happy one when he was helping me. I had a lot of respect for him.
So you kind of work your way through to 1980 over the next 5 years, some British championships, and then Kawasaki, Daytona, 1981.
Yeah, when I left the Machin and Saunders garage, Roger Burnett became my mechanic, and he did a year with me on the George Beale Yamaha. I rode for George for 3 years, and at the end of 1980, George says, I'm not going with you next year because I think you've peaked in your career, and that's probably it. And full respect to George, we still get on great, and I thought, well, I don't think I've finished yet. And then I was contacted by Mirawaki in Japan, who had an outlet, Rat Motorcycles in London, which Graham Crosby was part of, and said, would you like to ride for Daytona in 1981 with a guy called Wayne Gardner? And I'd never heard of Wayne Gardner, so I says, yeah, sounds good. So we did a deal, went to Daytona, anyway, it was a Chris Carter chat show in Daytona where I first met Wayne Gardner. He was a right little shit of an Aussie. He didn't like me, I didn't like him, so we didn't get on from the word go. I think we finished 10th and 11th in the race at Daytona, and then they came back to do the British Championship in England, and I got a phone call 2 weeks before the first BSB race at Cadwell from Milwaukee, will you put Wayne Gardner up? Well, I thought it's the last thing I wanted to do. And so I met him off a train at Market Raisin, and it was snowing, it was March, and he got off this train and he had a little brown case. He looked like he'd come back from the war. He had a pair of shorts on and a pair of flip-flops which were wired together with lock wire. And I took him back to a little tight freezing cottage that I lived in because I had no money. And anyway, we started to get on. I coached him, and we become really good mates eventually, and I helped him to win his first World Championship, and pretty proud of that.
So obviously he spent a lot of time in that area with you, Barkworth, and then he lived in Rugby, I think.
Yeah, him and Donna lived at Rugby and for a few years, and he went on to, obviously, when we were teammates at Rothmans Honda, he climbed the ladder to go on to GPs, and his biggest downfall was getting into one of these sports therapy people who can blow your head apart. So Wayne Gardner was just like Steve, who's a character who likes fun like me. Whatever Wayne and I did, whether we rode donkeys backwards and on the tail, we'd go on a stopwatch to see who could stay on the longest, and jump cars and wreck scooters, and then he went on to being, like, from his motorhome to the garage, he'd have to be escorted, couldn't do this, couldn't do that, and eventually said, will you come to Assen with me in 86? He said, my head's gone, I need help. And basically I just went with him. We went into Assen. Obviously I blew a froth off a few and put a car in the ditch on the way back. He had a blazing headache the next day. Irv Kanemoto couldn't understand what was up with him. But he qualified pole at Assen, won the race, and went back to being Wayne Gardner, and then went to win the World Championship. He just needed to be himself again.
No, brilliant. But you've got a reputation for that, kind of on the backboard, really, helping out an awful lot of riders throughout your time. And like you just mentioned, Roger Burnett, a mechanic of yours.
Yeah, Roger mechanic for me, and then I helped him with his track craft and schooled him, and then eventually Barry Simmons said, when Wayne and Aslan moved on from me and there was just me and Joey left, he said we need another good guy to do BSB, and I said I don't think you'll go wrong much with Roger. So he came in 85, and he wasn't really right up for the job, but I took him out, let him follow me at tracks and encouraged him, and he became a really, really good rider. And this last 2 years I've been schooling a lad called Joe Francis in BSB. They came to me for some help in the beginning of 2012. He was 14 years old, met him at Brands, and this last year he became a Motorstar champion, and at 15 years old, so he was a magnificent guy to work with, and hopefully he'll maybe be going on to the Spanish Championship. I've moved him on to Roger Burnett, hopefully, to bring him on and to GPs.
So going back to your early days, well, pretty much most of your career, really, why that Mexican Tash?
The 118 Tash. I think sideboards and Tashes were all the rage, but obviously I I maybe had a bit more hair and a bit longer tash than most. I don't know why, Steve, it just was there.
It doesn't do it for you now, Okay, and then obviously, after the Moriwaki Kawasaki job, Daytona. Did you ever win Daytona?
Yeah, I won Daytona at the end of my career. When Skull Bandit Suzuki, Rothman's on to pull the plug in 86, joined Skull Bandit, they pulled the plug in 87 after I come back from the Swan Series after a successful run in Australia. And then a guy called John Surtees contacted me to see if I'd meet a guy called Bob Graves and ride the Quantel Cosworth, and we went to Daytona for the first meeting in 1988, and yeah, we won on the Cosworth, so it was great, yeah.
And then you jumped on the XR69, there's quite a famous Suzuki, something I've ridden actually, on some old classic meetings which Phil tamed these days, but obviously in the day was a fantastic bit of machinery.
Yeah, I've read what Michael Dunlop says about it. Don't stop, don't brake, don't do anything, so it's probably one of the best bikes I ever rode. So yeah, after the Moriwaki year, Gardner moved to Honda, and Graham Crosby moved on to GPs, and I took up I didn't know, in end of 81, Wayne Gardner took me to the Swan Series with Moriwaki. He won it, and I finished third. And then Gardner went on to Honda, and I was sweating because Rex White and the Suzuki management said they'd probably give me a ride, and I came back, and they took me on as the third rider behind Mick Grant, the late John Newbold, and myself. So I was very fortunate to get that break, and it was my first real big break on a bike that could win, and I wasn't going to let anybody beat me that year. I was really up for it, so I was very successful on the bike, and did the first 120 mile an hour lap at the Ulster Grand Prix that year, and everything just went right for me, Steve.
So obviously I'm trying to do a bit of homework on you, or have been doing, but surprisingly on the internet there's not an awful lot, there's lots and lots of photos, but not too much, as in script and what you've actually achieved in a fantastic career. So I'm on the phone to a lot of people then. I'm ringing, I spoke to Keith Martin, who wrote your book, Roger and Out, and obviously Keith's not very well at the moment, unfortunately. I spoke to Granty. Now, Mick Grant, another blast from the past, shall we say. Was he tailing off his career as yours was blooming?
I think Mick was still riding at his best in 82, but maybe I was just a little bit more hungry, because Mick had a successful career obviously on the Kawasaki's, in GP, World Endurance, he's won GPs, he's 7 TTs I think, and it was a step up the ladder for me. I knew John Newbold would be an handful because he'd been Barry Sheen's teammate twice in GPs on the IG 500, so I knew it was going to be a big ask, but I believed in myself, and I think we raised the bar a bit that year, because Gardner knew all the circuits, Haslam obviously knew the circuits, and Honda were a good team, they were hungry still, and they wanted to beat Suzuki, so we just went up, we broke every lap record that year, every race record, so the bar was raised. But if you watch some of the old videos, Mick was still there, he wasn't being left behind by much at all, so maybe we were just a little bit more hungry.
Obviously, back then, you just mentioned a few, but a massive amount of big names, so flipping competitive. How do you think that, I know you're obviously involved heavily on the BSP side of things now, but how do you think that now compares from that era to the modern day British Superbike series?
It's difficult to say, you know, people always say that was the best era, they always say Aylward was the best era. I think BSP is very good now, but there is maybe limited winners, but the racing's good, where maybe if you look in Motorcycle News, the Christmas edition, you had a picture of Mallory Park, the start there with 60,000 people, and the first three rows are nearly all people who could win the race, you know, going from like, Granty, Sheeny, Ditchburn, John Williams, John Newbold, Granty, Phil Reed. It just went on, and you could see why people were really into it then, because there was a lot of manufacturers' bikes on the grid as well. So it was an exciting period. It's when probably a 750 Yamaha like that one down there could pull out a shock surprise.
So throughout your career, obviously 12 British Championships. In your mind, which was the best? Was it a bike? Was it a championship? Was it the person you beat? What really meant the most to you?
I know what two races meant the most, but I think the best championship I won was probably on the XR69. It was a really enjoyable to win the MCN Superbike Championship that year, which is like the BSB now, and then also to win the British Championship as well that year was pretty special. And you know, to go to Silverstone when the GP was there and lap faster than Sheen and Roberts on an old diesel, as we called them, you know, we were half a second quicker than the GP bikes around Silverstone, me, Aslam and Gardner, and it went to the last lap, and it was when people wanted four strokes to start coming in a bit bigger, and all the Japs flew over Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki, and they were all on the pit wall for that race. And it's the only time I saw Wayne Gardner cry after a race. It was the only time I really put my neck on the line massively as well, to go through, they called it Abbey Curve before Woodcote. I'd passed Aslam on that lap, and then I let Wayne go a little bit through the right-hander before Abbey, and you couldn't quite do Abbey flat on a big four-stroke, but this was going to be the day I did it, and I went through there catching Wayne, and I came out on the top of the rumble strip, tucked in, dived past Wayne into Woodcote, but because the bike was on its side, I never got changed down in the gearbox, and I had a right-hand gear change. I had everything on the floor. I could see the bloke with the checkered flag, and I had the throttle like that, but she wouldn't go. And because I was in top still, and I thought Wayne was just going to come through, but I took the flag and won the race, and we lapped quicker than the GP, and that was a mega feeling.
Obviously you had a brilliant career, 12 British Championships, but Grand Prix wise you never actually got to the GPs season long. But 1983 you led the British Grand Prix.
Yeah, I led the British Grand Prix, and the visor steamed up and I had to pull in, and pretty embarrassing really, because I wasn't normally I was a bit wild, but I didn't normally show it too much in the garage, but I threw my helmet on the ground, and I remember it bounced off the ground and hit the tin roof in those garages at Silverstone, and all the Japanese were looking at each other, and they all started backing off, and I thought that wasn't a good move from a career, that, but you know, I finished seventh and ninth, I think, at the British GP. I finished 11th at Assen, but they were all like what Honda gave you as a guest ride, and there was a time where with with Suzuki that there were 2 bikes made for me in Japan after the XR69 year in '82, and someone came in behind the scenes and wormed me out of Suzuki, basically.
Pulled the rug out underneath you.
Yeah, you don't like saying about the dead or people who's passed on, but Barry got back into Suzuki, and they basically offered me a low money, and Honda were offering me a fortune to join them. So, and it wasn't till June in '83 that Chris Carter and 2 Japs come over to the Isle of Man and showed me this contract, why I'd turned it down to go GP racing a full year, and I never knew nothing about it. But enough said.
So pretty much you work your way through your career, and then I watched this on TV, on the internet last night. Obviously, throughout kind of your era was pretty much the F1 series where you had to race on the roads as well as on the short circuits to win the championships and so on. 1988, the first ever World Superbike meeting at Donington Park. I watched it last night on the TV, obviously he was there riding, and I believe the man you helped on his way, Roger Burnett, was pole position for that meeting. But my point being, obviously you raced there in that, which is a fantastic weekend from what I can work out. But that kind of changed things again, the way 4-stroke racing went. You know, being in the proper World Championship, no roads, very professional. And that was pretty much around the end of your competitive career.
Yeah, the only reason I did the roads because I thought to get into a factory team that you had to be good on the roads at that time and to win British Championship as well, and basically that was the way you did things in them days. And obviously Steve McLaughlin came along. He had this World Superbike Series idea to take it away from the World Formula One, and obviously, like you said, 1988 was the change, and that's when Formula One lost its world status, and we went to World Superbike. But you know, Formula One was a great experience. It went from basically being 3 circuits to being about 9 circuits in the end, where we went to Villarreal in Portugal, Assen, Zolder. You know, we did the TT, the Ulster, and you know, it was a good series. And you know, to lose the World Championship like I did at the last race at Zolder, when Joey and I were on equal points, and I was at the sharp end of the pack when the bike flew up, was gutting. But to be runner-up in the World Championship, I was proud of that as well.
So from your era, all the way through, obviously 70s, 80s, like we've spoken about, and obviously you've been quite heavily involved in the racing scene since as well, doing various things, helping out the Northwest 200 and helping riders out, helping myself out the TT, you know, team manager in the VSP paddock, and now working within the British Superbike Series. Who's your favourite rider of all time?
Well, the guy who I thought was unbelievable on a motorbike was Jarno Saarinen. Obviously he didn't have a long career, but he was probably like watching Marquez or somebody. You see some phenomenal sight come along. But one of my favourite riders was the late Bill Ivey and Paul Smart.
So actually now I've just mentioned Paul Smart, look at him.